Well, good morning, everybody. Just wanted to start off by, first of all, thanking Matt and Andrew for covering for me last week as I was traveling. And I really appreciate them just stepping up and adding my workload to theirs and covering some of my forecast videos. Also, just want to say I'm still this week away from the office, just with my family here. In fact, I'm recording this morning's video in my dad's Suburban. And so I hope the audio sounds all right for you all. But this week I'll be tethering from my phone to do all of my work. I'm in a place where there really is no internet access other than my phone. So I apologize if things are a little bit later than normal. It just takes a lot of extra time to upload this content to the web. But I really appreciate you all kind of giving me this flexibility to get out and just enjoy some time midsummer with my family. All right. I think I could tell you the entire history of June in one map, and it's this map right here. If you look throughout much of Canada, especially central North Canada, and then compare that to the temperature pattern that ran from the southwest to the central United States, and at times bringing in pretty high temperatures in the east, it'll tell you exactly what's going on. And anytime you have contrasts like this, the flow is going to go right in between it. And what was interesting about the way that this particular flow set up was that across the northern tier of the United States and Canadian prairie, we were way behind on picking up heat. And in fact, just the other morning, twice this week while I was here, I'm in northern Wisconsin. You could see your breath at certain times throughout the day. It was pretty amazing. I love it because I left extreme heat to get this little short vacation. But just want to show you this. These are what the ranks look like for the United States. So that's how June shaped up in terms of temperature ranks. Now from here, I just want to show you what was going on in the upper levels of the atmosphere. A couple of things to take note of. Persistent troughing. We talked about it for the last at least 60 days in the Gulf of Alaska. This extended into a piece of the jet stream. This rolled across, the U.S.-Canada border, the 49th parallel. And we did watch a ridging begin to build into the North Atlantic. And this is really the main piece of where the Bermuda High has been displaced. Now, normally if I see the Bermuda High here, I'm not overly concerned about drought building for example, in the southeast. But this particular flow did this to the jet stream level winds. So this is the 250 millibar, that's jet stream level, composite anomaly of the wind vector. So you're looking at how the winds were compared to average. And this is all that momentum we continually talked about. But you see how it kind of dumped right here? That flow in the upper levels of the atmosphere coming out of the north into the southeastern United States, rather than continuing to flow, is what prevented the drawing in of moisture into the southeast coast. And that's been one of the biggest areas that has seen some significant drought building in. Now, for the last 7 days, there have been isolated storms that have gotten into this area, which has been, we've desperately needed to be able to get that. But around, that flow, can you almost see it here? Like this is where we anchored a ridge. The flow came over the top and came into like this, cascading large storm complexes through here. Many of them got into the eastern Great Lakes. We also saw just a lot of daily sea breeze, convection down over parts of the southeast. But there are several places in through this area that have not been able to pick up the storms. Now, in addition to that, I think the biggest, driest spot that is anomalously dry is in Texas and Oklahoma. And this has been an area that's going to kind of be under the risk of continuing to look like this unless we get some sort of large, disturbing factor into this region, possibly the remnants of a hurricane, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But just to show you what this has looked like, just watch the flow. This is yesterday. Can you see where the ridge is in the U.S.? It's just right here. And you got this ring of fire set up, delivering big storms into the southwestern United States, Arizona and New Mexico, coming up through the other two Four Corners states and rolling over the top. And we saw last night larger storms that continue this morning right here in the Central Plains, Western Corn Belt region. But we can get storms out of this. There's a lingering front, a lot of severe weather and severe winds in the northeast yesterday. And just the storms were popping along the south side of this. And this is all extending up into that big ridge that's in the North Atlantic at this point. I did take note that we also saw some wildfire here in parts of California as well. And there is some smoke in the atmosphere in the parts of the Pacific Northwest. In terms of how things are going to be changing, I think a lot of the story is going to be written in the western United States in the near term. So there is something significantly different that we're going to have a discussion about here in a few moments. But just looking back over the last 72 hours, here's your kind of weekend precipitation totals. And pretty impressive to see how heavy some of these rains have been. Now, coming back to the southeast, just to focus on this is what June looked like. So these recent storms that have gone through here this past weekend were absolutely critical to breaking away from what had been pretty extensive drought. Most times, if you're going to forecast the southeast, it's going to be all about southeast ridging. Big ridges over the southeast can just completely shut things down, ruin the flow entirely, and we shut down the Atlantic, we shut down the Gulf of Mexico, and we get dry like this. But what it shows us is there's multiple ways to build in a drought. And what really hit this area so hard was the fact that the flow came in like this, and then weakly came over the top just like that as the ridge set up here. So I just wanted to kind of point that out because this has been an area that's really been going deeper and deeper into drought. Another way to look at this is they've had, because of that flow, a lot more sunny days with less cloud cover than average. Meanwhile, from the Four Corners states into parts of Kansas and then much of the upper Midwest has really seen a lack of good sunshine. The worst spot for this has been throughout the Canadian Prairie, the northern part of the Canadian Prairie, really getting up here into the forest, where we've had so much cooler weather, so many storm systems curling up here on the northern side of the jet stream, and just a lot of suppression of sunshine getting down to the ground. But what I'm kind of building to here is two things. Is anything changing in this pattern? We're going to talk about that in a second. And what has it done overall to our moisture? Because as we work our way here into the month of July, across most of the U.S., July is a critical month for all of the crops we grow. And as you take a look at it here, our newest drought monitor is really reflecting these changes. While there have been some improvements in the southern plains, the central plains, the southeast, all the way up here to almost the mid-Atlantic, has seen more and more degradation in the drought monitor. And another way to look at this is if you just go back and say, well, show me the soil moisture at the beginning of June, which is here. This would be June 1st. And then now look at it on July the 1st. And we can see that brown ocean we've been talking about here in the upper Midwest, still very much in place. Look at the increase in moisture down here from the southwestern monsoonal flow that's been coming around this big high pressure cell. We can take note of the exceptional but more acute dryness that's in Oklahoma, pockets of the Ohio River Valley. But I'm sure your eye is drawn over here to parts of Georgia, North and South Carolina, and Virginia, showing up quite dry. And that brings me to kind of my first longer range feature. The Climate Prediction Center did update this morning their seasonal drought outlook. And just feel free to pause this or go to cpc.ncep.noaa.gov and have a look at all their products. But the color I'm always looking for is this one. Where are they expecting drought to develop? And there are a few things on this map I'm a bit, I just look at it and go, okay, I don't see why we're thinking that we're going to have drought develop in those areas all the way to September 30th. And I am sure that the Climate Prediction Center has a lot of uncertainty in this as well. And the biggest factor is what's going on with our tropical season. Because you have a lot of folks here that could use some tropical moisture to come through and really break away from this drought issue. So there's a lot on this map that I'm sure they are just looking at going, all right, what might be driving this large area of drought increasing? Because overall, as I look at it, even though there's a temporary change in the jet stream pattern coming for the next 10 plus days, I don't necessarily think that the bigger factors have really changed too much. So let's get in and talk about all of that. We got to, of course, start with Hurricane Beryl. Yesterday, getting up to, Cat 4 in strength. You can see this is a very symmetric storm right now, suggesting that the environment in which it is spinning is not kind of starved for moisture on one side or the other. There's certainly not a lot of wind shear. We're getting outstanding upper level outflow from the middle of this hurricane. You can just see very symmetric features about it. And it's in a very good environment right now. If you're having trouble finding where you are, this is kind of the northern coastline of South America. And here are the Lesser Antilles. You kind of see their outlines here, and then the Greater Antilles are here. I think this really captures it. The National Hurricane Center, as they look out there at their forecast, understanding that there is a system behind this that's been given a 70% chance of developing. The steering current right now is pretty clear in the forecast. These trades are expected to take it right through the Caribbean by the time we get into like Friday, really Thursday night to Friday morning. It's likely going to be making landfall here south of Cancun, and is expected to be quite strong as it comes into this area, Cat 2 in strength. At this stage, we'll just need to watch the forecast trend as to where this is going to go. If we kind of blend all the models together, and by the way, this website arctic.som.ou.edu. These graphics, all made by Tomer Berg, exceptional map maker. I mean, this dude's got it down. I wish I could make maps this pretty, but he's got he's got a really great blend on several models, kind of suggesting where this is going to go. What I'm most curious about is by the time we get into this upcoming weekend and what's left of Beryl gets into the Bay of Campeche, do we start to see any of these ensemble members really showing up to be a bit true? In other words, dragging the leftovers of Beryl into the Gulf of Mexico and possibly, stretching throughout the Mississippi Basin, or maybe up even getting some of the remnants into the Ohio Basin. That will be an ongoing story all week as we continue to forecast this. But in terms of a trend, I'll show you the trend in a second. In terms of, this is the trend. These are the last several runs when we're blending together all of the models for a mean track. You can see that we've had pretty consistent forecast here as to where this is going to go. If there's anything in it, there's a bit of a southward trend on landfall, but all of them have, the leftovers of Beryl getting into the Gulf of Mexico, Bay of Campeche area, and that will be a critical time period for the U.S. to watch. Until then, these next 4 days, we're going to keep a very close eye right here on the coast of, right here in this part of Mexico, getting toward Belize. Take note of how close it will get to Jamaica as well. That's going to be critical to watch. Okay, bigger picture things for the U.S. This could be some of the moisture over the next 15 days. That's what we're looking at here. That comes north from Beryl. But as it stands, there's two things I think it's really critical to this. What could be driving this rainfall? All right. How are we going to continue to bring moisture into this area? And if you take a look from the Pacific Northwest into British Columbia, very, very dry compared to average. And as we look at what could be driving this, we're going to talk about something we've looked at many times this spring and now summer, that PNA, Pacific North American pattern. Now remember, when we are negative in the PNA, we're talking about West Coast troughs. But you can see that from about Wednesday all the way through next Monday, we're building in a positive PNA. And this just means ridging across the west. I think there's going to be a lot of question marks when you get out here as to whether or not that breaks down, which does seem to be the most likely scenario, given that overall we've not changed the North Pacific behavior. But I want to know, do we come back to this multiple times during this summer time period? Because if it does, it surges in a lot of heat into the western United States, specifically the Pacific Northwest. And if it's there, it won't also be, given the setup this year, it won't be east. So take a look. This is right now early this morning on the 1st of July. We've got a deep trough developing leading toward the 4th of July that's going to just build right here initially and head on off toward the Hudson Bay, forgive me. What I've got while this occurs is ridging by the 3rd of July building in here and broad ridging from Texas all the way over toward the southeast. So this flow is going to do something like this, all right? Now, as we get toward the 4th of July, we're going to be having to watch this trough very carefully for initiating severe weather in this region. I'll show you more about that in a few moments. But as we go into the weekend, look at the size of the ridge that the models are forecasting as the flow becomes highly amplified here around this low in the Gulf of Alaska. This is the major ridge. This is significant heat going up the East Coast. And this is a broader trough cooling things down this weekend, sweeping through the Midwest, upper Midwest, part of the plains, Great Lakes states. And what we need to watch is on the south side of it, are we capable of getting a front to move through the southeast delivering rainfall? Because as it goes forward into Sunday the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, that flow, boy, that really got amplified quick. And that's what could be driving better moisture into the southeast. Now, we'll talk about what it's going to do to the rest of the country in a moment, but I'm just focusing on this area because of how much drought has developed there. So this is the 8th of July, 9th, 10th, 11th. We do see out there around the 12th and 13th, we kind of get back into that same thing. A flattened ridge somewhere in here, trough off the west coast, little short waves will sneak over the top of this and make storms all along those dashed lines. But if you're inside of that ridge, the temperature's going to stay up and it's going to be drier. And we're going to have to see how that plays out as we get out here toward the middle of the month. But one thing's for certain, there's still flow in this pattern, but it's just more to the north than on average. Just follow the base of that trough and you'll find it. Okay? There will be waves of heat that try to penetrate into the Corn Belt. But at this stage, you look at this and you just don't see the heat anchoring in the Corn Belt with this particular pattern. So let's go ahead and have a look at what this all means. This morning, this is what our all hazards weather map looked like just before 7 a.m. And we've got excessive heat advisories and watches that stretch all the way from Kansas down to the Gulf Coast. A couple places where we have flood watches in place here. And then out west, this is excessive heat warnings and excessive heat watches to get up into Oregon. As we take a look at this early morning temperatures, there were some places down here that did not get below 80 last night. And while that may not be that uncommon, this is some very hot and sticky and kind of gross air to wake up to early in the morning. While around the Great Lakes states, it's 46 where I am this morning, right here, just outside of a town called Minocqua, Wisconsin. Okay, later on this afternoon, as the first wave starts to move in, we see the risk of severe storms in a big area here in the North Central Plains. Going into tomorrow, we're going to anchor that right here on the base of that trough into parts of Kansas, Missouri, and southern Iowa. The day 2 enhanced risk is something to be watched in this area very carefully. By day 3, this would be the 3rd of July, we'll watch the frontal boundary stretch right through here, the back side of which will come into this part of the plain, so a few different areas to keep an eye on severe weather. And on the 4th of July, we do see this spot down here where that frontal boundary will linger, serving as kind of an initiation point for severe storms over parts of Missouri and Kansas. So a lot of us meteorologists always joke, well, this is where you're going to get your natural fireworks that day. But I think it's going to be more than just this area. Early this morning, I was watching a few different storm complexes, one coming out of parts of North Dakota into southern Manitoba. Pretty active storms going on right now, though, this morning in Kansas and Kansas and Nebraska, heading in toward Iowa and Missouri. So let's start off there. I think we had a good initialization on the model this morning. And as we play this forward, this is what's going on through midday today into this evening. And just a lot of rain going over the same spots that have been hit repeatedly here. This is tonight, getting into early Tuesday morning. Going to be a wet one throughout much of the upper Midwest. The frontal boundary lingering, as we mentioned, right into this corridor. And just playing this out there through Tuesday, July the 2nd. That's where we're going to watch our severe storms tomorrow. Okay, we've kept an eye on that. And then as we work our way even further in toward Wednesday, that's where our frontal boundary will continue to sit. So again, I just want to take you back and let you watch that again. This is through this morning, playing into tonight, getting into Tuesday morning. This is through Tuesday afternoon and evening, now into Wednesday, and my animation will go out to about midday Wednesday. From there, we're going to do our typical 5 model update. Artificial intelligence forecast for the next 7 days. I don't think you're going to get any surprises here. This is the NBM, National Blend of Models. This is the WPC. And here we get into the European model forecast and the GFS. Very soon when I return, I can't wait to unload all these great new maps on you. I did make a major upgrade to my server while I've been up here on vacation. One of the things I worked on while I wasn't talking to you, and it's going to be great. I'm pretty excited about this. But we'll be able to show all of these projected against one another like I do when I show you this. This is the ECMWF taken away from the GFS, so the difference. So these colors are where the GFS is wetter, these are where the European is wetter. And it just shows you how the models struggle with convection, because right now the GFS is like, man, from Omaha clear to Chicago, it's putting down an extra 4 inches compared to the European model. So that's just what happens with some of these forecast models. But to see it all play out, let's go right now to the comparison. GFS left, European right. We've already seen through Monday and Tuesday as that low curls up there toward the Hudson Bay. By Wednesday, leaving the front, right? So this is the front we're going to watch on Wednesday. You'll see Beryl in both of the models here, possibly causing major problems for Jamaica at this point. This will be Wednesday night. As we then play through Thursday, a lot of isolated storms in this area as we're thinking about the weather for the 4th of July. That's early on Friday morning now. That low curls up into the northeast. And this will be the time frame over which we could get our first front that delivers some decent moisture into the southeast. There's going to be another one that follows it. This is Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And can you see over here on the European how it's increasing the chances of these storms? Now at this point, it'll be a discussion as to how long the ridge lasts in the west. What does Beryl do as it comes into parts of the Bay of Campeche? And the models are right now not necessarily handling, I think, the northern edge of this moisture in a way that will be representative of what will really happen. So I'm going to add to this the look at the ensemble averages for precipitation. So this is the chance of getting more than an inch of rain from now through the evening of the 4th of July. And so you can see where that front might be adding some critical rains here while we just go on repeat for the heavy rains and storms that hit this particular area. 4 days of the risk of severe storms in and around this region. So if we take the next 4 days and go ahead and stretch it out to a full week, that's the probability of an inch over the next week. And then what I'll be curious about is where the moisture gets dragged in from Beryl. If we take this out through 10 days, which is here, that is your 10-day probability of an inch. So this pattern continues to stay very, very stormy in key areas that have been exceptionally wet as of late. This is going to be most critical, I think, for me just to keep an eye on. Can we really hit this area with much needed moisture? Okay, from there, this is the week 2 forecast. And now we can really see the influence, especially as we get to the end of this week and start the next, of that western ridge. It's really beginning to show up here. Now, the new European model went for a drier area over a larger spot of the Canadian prairie, the Midwest, upper Midwest, Western Plains. And it's got more of what's left of Beryl getting pulled into this region. But take a look at the difference between the European and the GFS. The GFS ensemble trying to just leave Beryl's moisture in place down here, and it continues to keep its dry bias over the southeast. So I just look at all 3 models kind of together here to kind of get a sense of where this might go. On the temperature side of it, let's take a look at today's high temperatures. Remember, this is the 1st of July, so if you see any of these red colors, we're at the peak of the heating of our summer, and so to be warmer than that is exceptional. So we triple digits that'll extend, clear up into Kansas, parts of southern Nebraska, but this whole region, because of storms and cloud cover, much cooler than average. California's getting hot. This is now Tuesday into Wednesday. Look at these temperatures in California's Central Valley here, getting up into the 110 to 115 range. And you can just take note, right in through here on the northern side is where that frontal boundary lives. Okay, that's that lingering front I mentioned. So that's Wednesday. This would be the 4th of July. Much cooler air coming into the northwest. That's when that trough is digging in at this point. We're going to keep an eye on the severe weather right in through this area on the night of the 4th of July. This is getting into Friday, much cooler air as the big positive P&A pattern takes over. That's a west coast ridge. Now what we're trying to figure out is how long does this live here, because this is a nice cool down compared to average in the mid part of the country. It appears it's going to be around, well toward maybe the middle of the month before things start to break down, which we saw at the beginning of this. So the day 5 through 10 forecast really shows the size of that ridge with the cool down here. And this is the day 10 through 15. And the European model is right on board with it. That's day 5 through 10, and this is day 10 through 15. So that temperature pattern seems to be holding pretty well toward the middle of this month. There it is again. Okay, so what about beyond that? I want to show you what was released on Friday from the CPC. This is their mid-July to late July outlook, the 13th through the 26th. And it's pretty clear where they are seeing the ridge returning. And if it sits here, all around it, there's going to be storms that roll, in that typical ridge riding pattern. But pretty hot for the remainder of the month for a lot of us, so above average temperatures. From there, I want to show you their 1 month outlook. This is the newest one they just finished. This was done for today. It was released on June 30th, so released yesterday. And interestingly enough, they seem to be wanting to favor that larger ridge in the west lasting longer. This is a very interesting pattern, but more storms for the upper Midwest, Western Corn Belt, and I think they're just trying to capture what could be flow that's eventually going to get into the Bermuda High, which is way over here. But you get northwest flow, we're going to have cooler conditions in here where we've already had it, while heat will just continue to stretch right in this area. So I agree with that temperature map, but I think there's going to be more, a lot of nuance to the precipitation for the month of July. Right now, what are our big drivers? Is it the MJO? No. I mean, most of our metrics suggest the MJO is collapsed and not necessarily a strong player. The ocean temperatures, there's La Nina trying, but as I mentioned, for weeks, this is not going to be our main driver. It's the warm ocean in the North Atlantic, this temperature contrast here in the North Pacific that just keeps the jet stream moving in an unbroken fashion across the U.S. Now, at times will it ridge out? Sure, but it's not as though we've fundamentally changed anything. What I don't like about it is if there's a bunch of warm water here and then you put high pressure on top of it, and you got the same thing over here where we already know there's high pressure, there will be, because of just the length of a Rossby wave, there's got to be high pressure somewhere else, and it's probably going to be somewhere in here, like in this area. And all around that, you're going to get storms firing up. So I think that's our best guidance as we look out there longer term. What's interesting is the models don't show the high pressure in the U.S. They show the higher than average pressure here over the month of July, and there, okay, that's two of them, but just notice they don't have the warmer shading representing higher than average pressure somewhere, possibly, I guess, if I had to pick 4 states, I'd say Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, maybe a little Missouri, Kansas, I don't know, somewhere in here. If we zoom in on it, I'm going to show it to you, it's face value here. That's the precipitation pattern for the month of July. But I want you to see something. This is all initialization bias. What we need to do is just take it out away from the near-term pattern. And that's where I think we're going to probably see this ridge anchoring at times. Temperature-wise, 30-day stretch, I mean, we can see what the temperature's doing from July 10 to August 10. So until I see something to override what should be expected from this ocean temperature pattern, I think that's what we got. All right, a couple of other things to take note of globally. Next 10 days on precipitation. These rains are desperately needed in this area, but dry in the Manchurian Plain. Dry conditions which have really hit autumn in Australia. Well, now South Australia, New South Wales, Queensland getting desperately needed rains. This region right up here has got my attention though. Take a look at eastern Ukraine and western Russia. We've talked about this for months, just watching back and forth, kind of the seesaw effect here of how hot and dry it's gotten at times. And if you look over the last, this is 60 days, here's the Black Sea, so this is Ukraine. These are these dry pockets in this area. That we're going to talk about more in just a few seconds. Next, you can see where the Mayu front has sat, very, very wet, south of the Yangtze. But this has been this dry area that I just showed you. The rains are going to be trying to come into that region. So really critical moisture heading to that area right now. So to go back though to Ukraine and Western Russia, I just did one of my favorite sites, the true size of. I just brought Iowa over just to show you kind of the size of Ukraine in this part of Russia. So as you look at it, we right now have, if I choose these areas, which are, I don't know, we call that maybe 2.5 Iowas, the NDVI values are still very low. They've made a quick recovery, not much, but they've bounced off the lows. But this area is going to continue to be watched. And as you just saw, where was that map here? Very dry over the next 10 days in that area. Over to China, though, I pulled up these, there we go, these areas. And while their NDVIs were so high early, in fact, the new highest values, they have since, because that drought built in mid-June, dropped off pretty quickly. And I'll be looking forward to the July update to see if it went down any farther. But there are rains coming into that area, as you can see here. And with that, it's going to be cooler in that region. But come back to this part of Ukraine and Russia. Next 10 days, temperatures 15 plus degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than average for a 10-day stretch. So this is going to have to be watched carefully. Okay, that's what I got for you today. Hope you all have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.